Florida State scrimmage is a bit sloppy. Should we be concerned about that 20 days out from Georgia Tech?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts for free and on YouTube, part of the awesome Locked On Network, your team each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down and the sports slow down just a bit. Remember that this summer, FanDuel is hooking you up with a boost or a bonus every day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Here's the deal, folks. Florida State's first scrimmage that is being kind of publicized. There's been some rumors about how it went, some comments from Norvell and his coaching staff. It's part of the business, though. You expect some sloppiness, but how much? That's what I want to dive into, because almost every coach in college football says things similar to what Norvell did. We'll go over that here in a moment, but it's okay. For anybody out there panicking, and I saw posts on message boards and stuff for fans, that are just clamoring for information about their Noles, it's okay. If you take nothing else away from this podcast, again, it's okay. We are 20 days out from Georgia Tech, and I guarantee you that everybody that is on Georgia Tech staff is having the same things. Early in the year, you're throwing a ton at these kids, and I do mean a ton. You're going to have newbies coming in that are transfers, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, getting a ton of reps, because quite honestly, and I'll definitely go more into this, and this is a good sign, Florida State is pulling back the reins on several key players. Got to do it. I say it all the time, folks. Like it or not, your best players have to get on the bus. Actually, I had somebody mention that the other day as a comment. If your best players aren't playing, then it doesn't matter if the coaches are or anything else. You're not going to win. Injuries are always the number one predictor of who wins and who loses. Got to have your best players on the field. And then finally, it's just part of the heat and all the things that go on with fall camp. Kids get a little bit sloppy with the changing of the play calls and all the lineups changing. It's okay that things are sloppy. The coaches know what's going to be. They'll act like it's a big deal to try to motivate their kids. A gazillion pounds of coach speak. It's still okay. So let's break down the following points. Number one, going through Norvell's press conference, listening to it, going through some of the transcript. Two things stood out, and one is almost always the case. He used a gazillion pounds again of coach speak. Did very little naming of specific players except stating a few key guys like Patrick Payton, Byers, Big Mo at center, Darius Washington. They tried to hold back a lot of guys. They don't want them getting hurt. Great. But again, a ton of coach speak. We played good. We had some plays. It was a lot of we need to do better. He avoided using specific player names constantly. Why? As I say, this is my theory, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise. He doesn't want anybody to be mad because one player got mentioned and not somebody else. The only thing that really happened that was a little bit surprising, he mentioned Elijah Moore, the freshman receiver out of the D.C. area, and then a reporter asked a question about Elijah, and he just mentioned, hey, this kid finishes plays, meaning at the catch point, he's really good. And that's something that you could see on his high school film, and there was a clip earlier this summer of Elijah. That's great. But again, a lot of coach speak and just talking about the effort was good, but we were sloppy. That was his word, and that's why I used that in the intro, and it's still okay because it's early in fall camp. I have people ask, what does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. You're not going to be a well-oiled machine necessarily for an entire season. These are still college kids. There's going to be a ton of adjustments. They have to put in the freshmen, the transfers now, to see if they can really be trusted when it goes live. Again, the 24th of August, a very odd start to a season, you're playing in Ireland against a conference opponent that knows you pretty well in Georgia Tech. You should think that this is going to be a highly contested game because they got Haynes King, etc. If you don't play the young guys and the transfers and whatnot now in practice, when would you do it? This is the only way Florida State can attack this. That makes sense. I mean, you could certainly play your starters a ton and risk injury and not find out who else you have for depth in the middle of the heat in Tallahassee. Terrible idea. This is the best approach. So I'm glad what I heard Because if I heard crisp scrimmage, that means you're playing too many starters that know each other well. Because these other guys, they don't have any chemistry. Let's not kid ourselves in a live scrimmage situation. And you're also going to be putting them at risk. Can't have them like the situation with the O-line last year. This is one example for Florida State. They can't possibly be that unfortunate again. Seemed like every week somebody different was hurt, if not multiple. It was insane. This is how they avoid it. Norvell mentioned 4 different linemen being held back on snap counts. That is insanely high. But I understand after what happened last year. He's just like, this is not happening this year. We're at least going to play the guys that I know can play based on last season. I don't blame him one iota, and I would imagine that a lot of his guys are cool with that on his coaching staff. They probably talk about it a lot. I'll go into a little more depth on that point here in a minute with some of my notes, but got a funny story about that. This is not a phenomenon to Florida State, by the way. Coaches, as I'll talk about here in about 5 minutes, at other schools, watching press conferences, they're going through the same thing. Where is the fine-tuning point? So we'll talk more about that. Here's something interesting that he did bring up that is good to a certain degree that I'm concerned about that we probably won't know until the Georgia Tech game. And it's what I brought up probably 20 times since the spring. DJ made good choices. There was a drive where the offense was at their own 3 to start. I mean, you're backed up against the goal line, and they took it the length of the field. Again, a lot of the defense, especially the front 7, Daryl Jackson, Patrick Payton, a lot of these guys were in and out of the lineup. So which guys were in when he said offense? I don't know. I assume it was DJ that did the whole drive, but again, I don't know. I'm just concerned that I didn't hear him mention one receiver making a big play down the field. It was like a 20-play drive, which is cool, but I didn't hear him talk about any guys like hitting bombs or anything else. Was that by design or not? Now, I'm glass half empty guy, but that bothers me because one of the biggest questions going into this fall camp, does Florida State have any of the following? A pure number one, kind of hard to say they do because of who they lost. And while Malik Benson and some of the other guys have talent, they haven't shown it, number one, at Florida State. And quite honestly, nobody's been consistent anywhere they've been. So that's a concern. And then number 2, he didn't mention any tight ends making big plays, which is your secondary part of your passing game. So those are concerns that I have from the scrimmage. But again, I'm going to find the negative. That's just my personality. I'm very picky, kind of like a coach. If it's not exactly how I want it, I'm not happy. But I didn't hear him talk about any tight ends. Didn't specifically hear him talk about any receivers like being game breakers. We need to hear that. And quite honestly, from what I've been told, too many drops, which is polar opposite of what I wanted to hear. But again, that's why you play some of these younger guys. And if I can guarantee you, if the guys that had drops during the scrimmage have a even just slightly above average week in practice, it won't be good enough. The chance for the depth chart to completely fluctuate at wide receiver is certainly there. That's the one thing they can't have this year. Remember, DJ's a passing quarterback. He can run a little bit. But Jordan could get you out of trouble when everything completely failed. He could not only get a first down, he might score. DJ's not doing that. No way in the world. Your passing game, when he hits a mark, got to catch it. I don't want to be 3-4 games into this season and bring it up for the 4th or 5th time. Hey, the receivers aren't getting it done because of drops. This is the one area that I'm a little concerned about from practice. But again, I'm being very nitpicky. So we'll discuss that. But also, again, we're going to talk more about the injury bug and what's happened at a rival school and what another school in the SEC is talking about, because the balance that Florida State is using, I think, is the right approach. And we're going to explain that more next here on Locked On Seminoles. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle to keep it up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit available to U.S. customers. How much would you risk injuries to key starters to try to build out the offense, the defense, or the special teams? Meaning if you have 7 or 8 guys on each side of the ball, you're okay. We're set with you, but you still need to get your reserves in line and have chemistry. Where's the line? It's impossible, right? Because you might play a guy 5 snaps in a practice that's not even full pads. It may be a non-contact injury. That's the frustration with being a coach. I think that we can all say last year was weird with injuries for Florida State, but it comes with the territory of football. And this year, at some other schools, there's already been some injuries. Most notably, Montrell Johnson, the running back at Florida, had a setback, if you will, with a knee injury. Depending on the report you believe, and I'll go with Brandon Olson, he's pretty connected over there at Locked On Gators. He's hearing more than likely at least 4, it could be up to 8 weeks. If that's the case, that means he's going to miss the Miami game, which is the opening game for the Gators on the 31st. It happens. Again, I asked the simple question. If you're trying to build out depth, and Montrell was definitely going to be their starter, by the way, at running back, how much do you play your starters, especially in early fall camp, to gain chemistry when you're trying to fill out your starting positions and, quite honestly, you're too deep? Is there an answer to that? That same kind of question was brought up to Hugh Freeze recently at Auburn. It's been a situation that's been brought up with Cristobal at Miami. Either the spring, I believe it was. Everybody has this question at some point, and they all have their different beliefs. So back to the first part of the show when I mentioned Mo was sitting out, Darius Washington, Byers was out part of it, Patrick Payton, Jackson, several of these guys, I get it. I mean, they're going to start, like Joshua Farmer. But you still have to play them a little bit because the guys that are competing for even second team reps, they got to know what it's like to go against them. And I think that any coach out there that watches this show, a high school coach, junior high coach, college coach, whatever, you want to comment, hey, this is what we do. I'd love to hear what you have to say on YouTube because I've never gotten one answer. And let me put it a little further for you. Hugh Freeze openly, I give him all the credit in the world, said when somebody asked him in his press conference earlier this week, he's like, you know, we were talking about that yesterday. And he just had this sour, awkward look on his face like somebody had gut punched him. And nobody had even been hurt. Like they were getting ready to start their first, but they haven't even done it yet. But he knows they have to hit. They're not in near the situation Florida State is at Auburn. They still have more spots open. They got several transfers, etc. They have more to go through, yet they have less depth. So if he has even one guy, and you can pick the position, he's in a bigger problem spot than Florida State would be. And it's quite honestly probably not close. Receiver, D-line, there's some spots that are a little iffy to say the least. He's going to be playing freshman at linebacker. That's never good. But if you look at it like, okay, like those linebackers, young linebackers for Auburn, are they going to be able to do much? That's very ironic because Florida State's weakest spot is probably linebacker when it comes to depth. Guys that are sophomore, Cryer, Nicholson, same deal. DJ Lundy's the one guy that just absolutely can't get hurt. I'd put him in a body cast during fall camp and just let him practically coach. They can't, if he's out there, they're in deep, deep, deep trouble. They know it. They're never going to admit it, but he's the only experienced linebacker they have at Florida State. Cam Riley, the kid from Auburn, ironically, is a key component possibly, but most likely this is going to be an internal deal where they develop kids. They just can't get many guys hurt. They were very fortunate last year, so they're trying to battle it. Third and final part to all this, conversations, my own thoughts, and then conversations from other coaches is as follows. If they do have an injury at a spot, especially if it's a key player like Patrick Payton twists his ankle and he's out 3 weeks, misses the Georgia Tech game, but he's going to play game 2. How much does that impact a coach's thinking when you lose a possible all-ACC player, possible All-American? Do you think it really bothers them to the point where they're looking at it like, man, not only do we lose this guy, and it's against a conference opponent, but now we got to change the reps for the backups. And if any one of them gets hurt, like you get two guys down at a spot at pretty much any team in Georgia, it's a problem in college football. That's an issue. I don't know the answer to that either. Because, again, once a guy goes down, you still have the other players at the spot right there with him, the other D tackles, the other DN. They have to get accustomed to playing with a newbie. Going through drills is fun. It's nice for the coaches to get them some technique, but they must go through live reps, full speed, tackle to the ground to get chemistry. How can you do that after you've already lost your top guy? That's what Florida's trying to figure out at running back right now. Plus, they lost ETN. They're in a lot of trouble at running back. So I think there is a lot of thought to this on why coaches lose their hair and look like I do, and or have all gray hair and just constantly up and down emotionally, because there's no right answer. This fall camp stuff, when you hear sloppy scrimmage, I almost look at it as a positive sometimes, because that means I know a lot of starters didn't play. Pick a school. It could be UCLA, it could be Florida State, it could be Michigan. It doesn't matter. Got to rest guys, got to play the younger players. And as I said several times already this summer, you're talking about a scenario where Florida State's goal is to make the playoff and make a run. We already know. If you play more games, that means there's more reps overall, but that doesn't mean your players will play at a high level, the starters and the guys immediately off the bench, if you run them to death through the regular season and the ACC title game, and then they begin the playoffs. You got to cut back reps. If a guy plays 60 a game, he's playing 45 to 50. Fall camp is different now than it's ever been. This is the first year of the full-blown playoff. It is a disaster waiting to happen for some teams. Some teams are going to make a mistake this year. Who knows who it is? They're going to have some injuries because they hit too much or whatever. And early in the season, they're going to succumb to those problems. A couple L's are going to line up. And in today's world, no fairer way to put this, it's just true. You're going to see guys cash out, start looking for options in the portal. By the end of the season, that coach could be on the hot seat. That's how fine a line this can be. It ain't going to happen at Florida State. They've already figured it out. So, again, we're good on this. Last thing I want to talk about today is a little recruiting intel on how Florida State and Miami recruit. I had the opportunity to discuss this topic with Gavin, who came down to Florida State and Miami. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles to wrap up the show. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer and fewer games, that's okay, because the sports are coming back soon, and FanDuel has an opportunity for everybody to get what they want each and every time they open the app. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up any bet you want whenever you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Also, thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate it. For your second listen, please check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season that's on the gridiron, with discussion on upcoming seasons for all kinds of teams in the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, and new college football playoffs. Everything and more on Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So to finish up today, I want to discuss one thing that I love to talk about more than anything else, and that's recruiting. I went down to IMG, a school Florida State definitely recruits very hard. It's arguably the top program in the nation, and met with several recruits. One of them I know very well, and that's Gavin. He actually committed to Miami, and I'd had a chance to speak with him face-to-face on some of the things with the recruitment at Florida State, their pitch, Miami, how they look at things. And I asked him some big box questions, not just his recruitment. But here's the biggest takeaway that I got. I asked Gavin about what he thought, like how Miami looked at things from Cristobal, and then how Norvell looked at it. And we completely agreed on this. I said, with Miami, do you think like they'll, I don't want to say like just throw a kid under the bus in terms of character, not care and still take him, but what do you think? And he's like, well, with Norvell, like he's bigger on the person than he is the player. And the way he said it, and like he has a lot of respect for Norvell. Again, that was his second pick. He was pretty clear. With Miami, he didn't disagree. Like he thinks talent's more important to Cristobal, but he also knows he wants a culture there too. And I just thought it was interesting. He was just point blank. I've known the kid for a while. And this is one of the interesting aspects of getting to know players firsthand, face to face. One of the reasons I travel as much as I do, there's no substitute for an in-person interview. It's something that kids are much better at than if I get a DM. Like the language they use in it is hardly English. They skip a lot of words, and quite frankly, they just try to get in and out. But with an in-person interview, it's a lot more collective data that I can use in a million ways. So again, Gavin talked about how Miami and Florida State are similar, but FSU is a little pickier about the person, he thinks. And I think, I mean, it wasn't like a massive gap, but it's still noticeable to me. And I think it's an interesting part of college football because there have been teams forever. You could tell certain teams, like, they'll take Renegades because they want the talent. It's true. Florida State is one of the pickier schools, I think, right now in major FBS in terms of finding guys that are not only good, but if they don't fit our culture, we'll cut bait. He's done that with the portal too, speaking of Norvell. He's not really going to worry about it because he would rather develop kids that want to be at Florida State. And once they're here, he doesn't want them leaving. You know, sometimes it doesn't work out, and it is what it is. But he wants kids here for the purpose of playing for the Noles and building a chemistry that leads to team football. That's something I've talked about a lot, and I thought it was interesting that Gavin gave the guy a lot of credit. I'm giving a very short summary of our conversation, not trying to let out too much, but he thinks highly of Norvell. So that was really interesting to me, and it just shows you that, once again, if you recruit kids with honesty, you're going to be in the mix. Gavin is a kid that grew up watching Florida State, Miami. He's from Central Florida, so that's not really shocking that it came down to those two schools. He picked Miami. Their NIL package was definitely higher, but he thought that they did a great job, and he was very, very high, ironically, on Derek Nicholson, the linebacker coach at Miami, who played at, guess where, Florida State, before he played in the NFL. So good luck to him. He's a great kid, but I just thought I would share that. Today's episode was fun for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Make sure you hit that like button and that notification bell, and please rate and review this podcast. Share it. And if you want to comment on YouTube, love to hear what you have to say. I'm curious, again, for the overall theme. It's okay that Florida State's first major scrimmage, whatever, was sloppy. What did you think? Have you heard anything? And what are your concerns moving forward with Florida State? Everybody have a good one. Take care.